Hey students, welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Today's aim is suburbanization in the US, and here are your objectives. Please pause the video, look these questions over, and get ready to copy some vocab terms and take some notes. Suburbanization is the movement of people from cities to suburbs. In the US, the process of suburbanization began in the 1950s, right after World War II ended. And suburbanization is still going on. The suburbs continue to grow today. A suburb is a residential area outside of cities, and the key word here is residential. A suburb is a place where people reside or live, but usually not the place where they work. So suburbs have far more houses than businesses. Also, suburbs exist beyond the city limits and are therefore politically independent of the city that they surround. And that's important because a suburb, unlike a neighborhood in a city, has its own government and collects its own taxes. Why did suburbanization happen in the 1950s? One reason was the baby boom, an increase in the birth rate in the US after World War II. When World War II ended, men came home from the war and were very happy to be back with their wives and girlfriends, and a lot of women had children. So the baby boom refers to all the children born in the US between 1944 and 1964. And the generation of children that were born in these years are called baby boomers, or just boomers. My parents are boomers. They were born in 1950 and 1951. So the baby boom meant that parents had more kids to take care of, and they wanted more living space for these growing families. And that desire for more space was one thing that fueled the growth of the suburbs. Another cause was the passage of a law called the GI Bill. And this also happened right at the end of World War II in 1944. The GI Bill provided low-interest home loans subsidized by the government for veterans of World War II. And the GI Bill made it easy for veterans who had growing families to afford a big home in the suburbs. And the last reason was the Interstate Highway Act, signed into law by President Dwight Eisenhower in 1956. An interstate highway, or just interstate, is a multi-lane highway that has room for a lot of traffic. And the Interstate Highway Act authorized $25 billion in government funds for the construction of 24,000 miles of interstate highways all across the U.S. Americans, although as you'll see in a moment, only white Americans, could now live in a suburb and easily commute to work each day in the city. So the interstate highway system allowed people to work in the city but live outside of it. So one of the many problems with suburbanization is that it is a major cause of segregation in the US. Basically, whites left cities to move to suburbs, but they used legal tactics, intimidation, and violence to prevent non-whites from moving to the suburbs too. So for several decades, non-white people were unable to live in most suburbs in the US. The US became even more segregated than it had been, with suburbs being mostly inhabited by white people and cities being mostly inhabited by non-white people. Here are some causes of segregation. All of them contributed to segregation between cities and suburbs. First, redlining is a policy by which banks deny home loans to people of color. White Americans were able to get low-interest loans from the government or from banks, but non-white Americans could not. Second, restrictive covenants are sections of a housing contract that forbid the owner of the house to sell it to a person of color. And white flight was when white people moved from the cities to the suburbs. It's called white flight because, as you just saw, only white people were able to leave the cities. Non-whites remained in cities while white people moved to suburbs. Here's one of the first suburban developments. It's called Levittown, New York, and it was located in Long Island. It was built by developer Samuel Levitt after World War II for returning veterans and their new families. And the communities in Levittown offered attractive alternatives to cramped central city locations and apartments. But as they did with most suburban developments, banks excluded communities of color from Levittown by only lending money to whites. Housing construction in Levittown was modeled on assembly lines, enabling quick and economical production of similar or identical homes. Standard Levittown houses included a white picket fence, green lawns, and modern appliances. And as you can see in this picture, the houses pretty much all look the same. All right, now it's time to review the objectives. If you don't know the answer to any of them, rewind the video and look again. I will see you in class. Bye, students.